Hi, my name is Blaine Monaghan, and I'm the President and CEO of Pacific Ridge Exploration Limited. We are focused on copper in British Columbia, and our goal is to become BC's leading copper exploration company. We trade on the Toronto Venture Exchange, and the symbol is PEX, Papa Echo X-Ray.
Blaine, good to see you. Right, we're going to talk copper, and we're going to talk drilling and all sorts of wonderful things. But I've got to kind of like maybe come at this a little bit head on. We've had a few chats over the years, and the story just hasn't kind of caught fire. What's going to make the difference? The market's obviously doing well. Gold price up, silver price up. Copper sneaking up there as well. Generalist investors are in here, but you're not getting much love at the moment. Why is that?
I would argue differently. When we spoke last time, I believe that was early June, just after we closed a $3 million financing that the Fiore Group helped lead. We were at about a $3 million market cap. Today we're at about a $14 million market cap. We just announced an initial 43-101 report for Kliyul, which is our focus, and just wrapped up 2 drill programs. So I would agree with you in a certain respect that I don't think that we are fairly valued, but we certainly have been trending in the right direction, and I think that trend is going to continue.
Right, but what's going to drive the share price, right? Okay, you got the Fiore Group in, and then you sit in their offices, etc. But I want to understand, what do they see in you, and what do you think the strategy is that's going to get you noticed? If you look at some of the other kind of copper players, people that you would comp yourself against, I'd say they seem to have a little bit more talk than you do.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. So as mentioned, I think we are trending in the right direction, and a lot of that does have to do with partnering with the Fiore Group and also reporting that initial resource estimate for Kliyul. But we did report that in the summer. I think as time goes on, as we continue to communicate the story, and we're going to be aggressively communicating that story, we're going to close the gap with these peers that trade 3 to 5 times higher than we are. And you couple that with drill results from RDP, which returned one of the best copper gold intervals in 2022, plus additional drill results from Kliyul, I think there's a chance to even surpass them.
But okay, 2022 data, it's had time to kind of marinate and the market to digest it. That in itself's not going to do it. So what was Kliyul and the 2025 program going to add to the story?
Again, Matt, I'm going to have to disagree with you. I think 2022 was a different time. At that time, RDP was under option to a partner, Antofagasta, one of the world's largest mining companies. So it wasn't really our project at the time, but they returned a result, or they funded the drill program in 2022, and one of those holes was 107 meters of 1.4 copper equivalent. And I think that just kind of snuck under the radar screen at the time, just because it was an option partner that funded it. The markets certainly aren't as robust as they are today. As a matter of fact, that's why we chose to go back to RDP this year, because AMARC just up the road reported a very similar intercept. It's in the same terrain, same host rocks, and their share price quintupled, and today they have a 250 million market cap for it's a brand new discovery. Don't get me wrong. It's very exciting, and they've got some other assets, but we traded a fraction of them. And if we can return a similar result in today's market, I think ourselves and our shareholders will be richly rewarded.
Right. Okay. Sorry to labor the point, because I'm so keen. I know you, good guy, but likewise, sometimes old stories are old stories, and it's hard to get people to kind of look back in here. So what type of data are you going to need to jam together to get people to relook at what the potential? We talk about that whole, the RDP whole, great, but you need more. So is it worth talking about maybe some of the 2025 drill results that you've had, and why you, and how you kind of layer that, how you jam that data together, kind of paint a picture which says the potential is good, and as a cornerstone, this is what we're looking at with the resource estimate, but we can go further. I need that kind of growth component to what I'm talking to you about.
Yeah, lots of opportunities for growth. I mean, both with RDP and Kliyul. I mean, you're right. Kliyul is the flagship. After this year's drill program now, we've spent more than $15 million, drilled more than 20,000 meters. We've reported our initial resource. It remains open still in many directions, and we know we can continue to grow it, whether through infill drilling or resource expansion. And we didn't do much drilling at Kliyul this year. We only drilled 2 holes in 1,300 meters. But we've reported that we've seen visual copper mineralization at Kliyul and RDP. So at RDP, that's where we started. We drilled 5 holes in 2,100 meters, and for the 5 holes, we intersected copper gold mineral or copper sulfides, and same at Kliyul. So we're now waiting for those results. So I think the Kliyul resource underpins the valuation. If we just had Kliyul alone, I think we should be more highly valued. But positive drill results, and I am expecting that from both RDP and Kliyul, should really help put us on our way, to so to speak, and set the table for the next chapter of growth.
Okay, I'm wondering if it might make sense for us to kind of go through a few of these kind of variables that we're talking about, just so one, I understand them better, and maybe kind of let's have a better conversation towards the end. So right now, the resource estimate, it's entirely inferred. It's early days. How do you intend to move that forward? What are the specific steps are planned in terms of upgrading the resource?
Yeah, I mean, Matt, I think we can go back, years and years ago, and I would have said, our minimum goal for Kliyul, or the Kliyul main deposit, was, 250 million tons of about a 0.4 copper equivalent. So I'm quite pleased with this initial resource, because it's well in excess of that on the tonnage front. The grade is a little bit lower. I think we can improve that grade through additional infill drilling. There is opportunity to continue to expand the tonnage, also through resource expansion. But I think a very important part of this story moving forward will also be testing some adjacent targets. So we have to remember that Kliyul main zone is just one target area that occurs along a 6-kilometer long mineralized trend. It's made sense for us to focus on that area, but there are 5 other targets that have been poorly tested or not tested at all. And these could also be other potential porphyry deposits, but could continue to grow the overall tonnage at Kliyul. So I think there's a lot of opportunities and avenues for growth at Kliyul, both at the Kliyul main zone deposit and adjacent targets. And I'd like to see more attention focus on these adjacent targets in the years ahead. I think Kliyul main zone is a good base. We can continue to grow it, but honestly, right now, I think those meters would be better spent on trying to make new discoveries.
Interesting. Okay, so this conversation's moving over. Let me just stay, if you don't mind. Can I just stay with the resource estimate again, and allow us to have a better conversation going forward. Things that you've chosen to do there. You chose the cutoff of 0.2%, right? Why do that? And what picture again were you trying to create here? Because I get it. So let's just get something done here. Let's get a resource estimate, but it's not ultimately where you want to be. So why do things like that? 0.2 copper equivalent, in fact.
Yeah, the 0.2 copper equivalent is basically what a lot of our peer companies have used when also calculating the resources. I'm quite certain that Kodiak used that as well. I mean, you're going to use a number of different potential cutoffs, going down to we went down as low as a 0.15, and we were up as high as, I think, a 0.3, and we used 0.2 as kind of the base. And I think that is an appropriate cutoff right now for porphyry deposits at BC. And ultimately, that's also what the independent third party decided on also when reviewing other similar deposits and styles of mineralization.
Okay, so but if we look at what you've got in that resource, can you talk about the kind of continuity of that mineralization? Is this a good base from which to build?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's a single deposit, and that's one other huge advantage here. We can stack up our resource against all these other peer companies, and I consider our peer companies like Vizsla Copper, Kodiak Copper, Northwest Copper. There are several advantages with this deposit. A is the mineralization is hosted in just one zone. It is contiguous. It is a current resource, and it remains open both through infill and resource expansion. So I think one of the other important parts of this story when we're thinking about a porphyry, it's a copper gold porphyry, not to not to denigrate other porphyries, but I'd much rather have a copper gold porphyry than a copper moly porphyry. And as a matter of fact, one of the other interesting parts of this study is that's enabled us also to look at it from a gold equivalent standpoint. And as a matter of fact, Kliyul, although we market it as a copper gold, it is a gold copper porphyry system. So we like to use the copper equivalent because it gives us the opportunity to compare ourselves to peers. But if we were to look at this from a gold equivalent standpoint, you would actually have, instead of 2.42 billion pounds copper, which I think can sometimes be hard for people to get their heads around. If we use a gold equivalent, it'd be 5.7 million ounces gold equivalent. So this is already a significant deposit that can continue to grow. And there's other opportunities to make similar discoveries throughout the property area.
So why don't you do that? Why don't you use a gold equivalent?
Well, we do talk about it in the technical report, and it is a part of the corporate presentation. But ultimately, there aren't many peers for us to compare ourselves to in BC. So this is a way, using the copper equivalent is just sort of a handy way that we can quickly compare ourselves to some other copper porphyry peers in BC and demonstrate just how undervalued we are.
I kind of couldn't care less if you can't compare to other people. When you said we are over 5 million ounce gold equivalent company, I'm paying attention when you said 2 point whatever billion copper. No idea what you're talking about. And I think a lot of people might feel the same way.
Well, again, I think a very important part of this story, Matt, and we really haven't touched upon it yet, is what's it going to take? Right? That's the question. You're fairly familiar with the story. We've been talking for years. I think we've delivered on what we were trying to do. I think a big part of the story now will be continuing to communicate the value proposition to investors. And we plan to be very, very aggressive on that front. Things have moved really quickly just since June. I mean, obviously the Fiore Group saw the potential. They helped raise that money for us. We're now a part of that umbrella. We reported that initial resource. It took place, and we reported that in August, and we completed 2 drill programs. So really in little over the past quarter, there's been a lot of different catalysts. Now we're waiting for news results. And in the meantime, we plan to spend money to get the word out.
Do you know, you say we've kind of delivered on what we said we would deliver. I don't think you were able to, because the money wasn't available. It was a shitty market. I think you knew what you wanted to do. And I think you've done some good things, but I think you've been cash constrained. So can you talk to the kind of the access that Fiore Group and the people associated with it? What does that do for you in terms of the type of money and the access to capital, please?
The 2 most important things, Matt, I think is one, validation, right? This is one of the strongest mining houses around, backed by a billionaire and a strong technical team. Excellent deal flow. So I think it can give investors a tremendous amount of confidence that the management, the projects have been well vetted, and they've been willing to get behind it, invest their own money, and back it. The other important part, obviously, is access to capital, and that was really important for us in June. I mean, the market was still a little bit difficult at that time. It was improving. That $3 million cash injection back then got us off the mat and enabled us to complete the resource estimate and get back drilling, which is going to provide additional catalysts. You know, as well as your viewers, that, I mean, really just up until this summer, Q1 and Q2 of this year were just as bad as they had ever been. So it's really interesting to see and surprising just how violent this turnaround has been. And with the resource that we have, the backing that we have, the projects that we have, I'm expecting us to ride this.
Look, I wanted to ask you about things like pit shell design, etc. But it depends on kind of things like obviously metal prices, but also recovery factors. I mean, have you done a bit of work on that? What sort of recoveries are you getting?
No, that's something we have to do. That is one of the recommendations of the technical report. It's not an expensive component. I think it was budgeted about $50,000. So that's something we'll be starting on here shortly.
Okay. And again, there's no kind of comps to that that you could point me to. I know you don't want to say too much. But
we're not. We haven't seen anything deleterious. We're expecting it to be relatively straightforward. And again, the again, when thinking about the cutoff that was used and potential metal recoveries that were used in the calculations, that's based on other similar deposits in mines that the independent technical person thought was appropriate to use.
Okay, okay. So, and just talking about, it's a porphyry. Most people go, small companies shouldn't be tackling porphyries. It's expensive. It can be deep, etc. But what do you know right now about some of these deeper mineralization, deeper mineralized intercepts that you've been seeing, and and how do you get after them?
Yeah, interesting. So, I would argue that it sometimes isn't inappropriate for juniors to chase after them. Sometimes we can have a tremendous amount of success. More recently, GT Gold, a number of years ago, they were successful in delineating a significant resource and ultimately transacting with Newmont. So there are different approaches one can take. Obviously, we can choose to go it alone, and we have thus far, although we did bring in a partner for RDP at one point in time, but I'm glad we have it back because I think it does offer fantastic discovery potential. Or you can seek a partner. Right now, as I said, we've spent about 15 million at Kliyul and have been able to deliver this significant resource. And that's why I get back to that point is that it will require, a lot more money to continue to drill that out and increase the confidence and, increase the size. I think there's better bang for our buck right now, having already outlined a significant resource that we know that we can grow, trying to make other discoveries.
Okay. Well, let's maybe get on to some drilling then, because obviously you kind of got this kind of 6 kilometer porphyry trend that you're chasing. Are there any, when you're kind of doing the drill planning, modeling, etc., is there anything that you're saying, well, we got to be careful of any kind of structural complexity, faulting, anything that kind of any curveballs in there?
No, you know what's really interesting though, Matt. When we think about the Kliyul main zone where we reported this resource, historically, people felt that there's this east-west fault called the Valley Fault, and felt that it actually terminated mineralization to the north. Through our drilling, we've proven that isn't the case. As a matter of fact, it does look structurally complicated. There are a number of faults going through the Kliyul main zone, but there's very little offset. So I don't think we're as afraid of those faults as previous operators were. Just through our drilling, we've demonstrated it doesn't really impact. It is really just one big contiguous deposit. But when we're thinking about some of these other target areas, again, there are 5 of them. We've only drilled 1 hole at Ginger, 1 hole at Ginger South, 1 hole at Parish. We've never tested Back Ridge. We've never tested M39. And a really exciting target we haven't talked about, we identified in last year's ZTEM survey, and it has a very similar, a similar magnetic signature to the Kliyul main zone. It's a little bit to the north. It's a target that absolutely has to be tested. Ultimately, it may show that Kliyul main zone is just one small part of a larger system.
And then would you get into kind of world of like spectral mineralogy, vectoring, alteration, geochemistry? How do you go on from move on from that sort of ZTEM survey that you've done?
Yeah, there is a historical mineral occurrence in the area. We haven't spent too much time there. The mineralization does not daylight or outcrop, so right now it is really just a magnetic anomaly, but it looks very similar to Kliyul main zone. So I think at some point in time, perhaps doing some IP over the target area would be very helpful. I think that's something we'll look at this year. It wasn't something we were able to do this year, really just because we were first focused on the RDP project, the day target. We did have our camp set up at Kliyul, and then we were just putting people back and forth on a daily basis. And then as we got more capital, we were able to drill a few holes at Kliyul, but weren't able to actually complete that IP program. So I think that's something that has to happen.
So you're saying, rather than kind of advance any kind of PE out this stage, the biggest bang for the buck, drill, get after discoveries, right? So whereas like if you look at Kliyul, is there kind of evidence of any kind of zonation that it could indicate a kind of richer core at depth? Is that what you chase, or with RDP, what do you how do you prioritize your spend? Because you've got to be efficient, right? And that's what I'm interested to say.
Absolutely, and that's why I was really pleased that we were able to get back to RDP this year and set up camp at Kliyul, and that meant we were able to do some drilling at Kliyul also. And that was one of the reasons why we always liked RDP. I mean, Kliyul has always been the focus, but RDP is only about 40 kilometers to the west, so it's always made a lot of sense to advance these projects simultaneously to help keep your costs down. Now, thinking about next year's exploration program, it's still too early to tell. We're going to be waiting for results from RDP and Kliyul, and we also have to see how the market responds to that. And if the market responds heartedly, that will help us determine just exactly what we should focus on and how much.
Okay, so if I'm talking, so I've been rather blunt during this conversation because I want you to do well, but I'm also trying to suck out of you what exactly is the thing that I'm looking at. What do you think the one differentiator is here for you guys, which says we should be more fairly valued than we are now? Not just that eternal cry from CEOs or we're undervalued. What exactly have you got now that people should value more?
Kliyul main zone deposit. Even if we just had Kliyul main zone deposit alone and we didn't conduct any exploration this year, we have no drill results pending, we should be trading at a much higher multiples, just based on what we've done and what we've outlined at the Kliyul main zone. The rest is gravy.
But what have you got there? Remind me. Give me the numbers.
Kliyul main zone, 334 million tons at 0.33 copper equivalent, which works out to be 2.42 billion pounds copper, which includes 1.2 billion pounds copper, 2.74 million ounces gold, and 10 million ounces silver. For a 14 million market cap,